The Philippine president was kidnapped in front of everyone. Imagine this. The leader of a nation, a man who once held immense power, is suddenly taken without warning, without explanation, in front of cameras, in front of the people who once cheered his name. The world watches, stunned, as an 80-year-old former president, barely able to walk without a cane, is forced onto a plane bound for The Hague. The story you're about to hear is not just about a kidnapping, it's about betrayal, power, and history repeating itself. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to the days of Ferdinand Marcos Sr., a man who ruled the Philippines for more than 2 decades, draping himself in the illusion of democracy while suffocating any opposition. Elected in 1965 and re-elected in 1969, Marcos was the first Philippine president to win a second term. But instead of stepping down when his tenure was up, he declared martial law in 1972. With Proclamation number 1081, he seized absolute power, suspended the constitution, and placed the entire country under military rule. Under his reign, thousands were arrested and tortured. Political opponents, activists, and even ordinary citizens who dared to speak out found themselves in prison cells, or worse. The infamous Philippine Constabulary under General Fabian Ver, Marcos' most trusted enforcer, oversaw many of these operations. The media was heavily censored, with only government-approved narratives reaching the public. Take, for instance, Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr., Marcos' most vocal critic, a charismatic and fearless opposition leader. Aquino was among the first to be arrested when martial law was declared. He spent 7 years in prison before being allowed to go into exile in America for medical treatment. But exile did not silence him. From abroad, he continued to denounce Marcos' dictatorship. In 1983, against the advice of friends and family, he returned to the Philippines, believing his country needed him. As he stepped off the plane at Manila International Airport, he was assassinated right in front of cameras. His assassination sent shockwaves across the nation. Aquino was not the only one targeted. Jovito Salonga, another opposition leader, barely survived an attack at a political rally in Plaza Miranda in 1971. An attack many believe was orchestrated to silence dissent. The pattern was clear. Anyone who challenged Marcos vanished, either into a prison cell or the afterlife. Meanwhile, Marcos and his cronies plundered the nation's wealth. Billions of dollars into public funds were siphoned into offshore accounts, extravagant properties and luxury items. The First Lady, Imelda Marcos, became infamous for her lavish spending, amassing thousands of pairs of shoes, expensive jewelry, and real estate across the world. While the Marcos family lived in excess, millions of Filipinos suffered under a crumbling economy, widespread poverty, and a ballooning national debt. But after decades of corruption, cronyism, and brutality, the people had enough. In February 1986, the assassination of Ninoy Aquino, economic decline, and electoral fraud in the snap elections ignited nationwide outrage. The People Power Revolution, a historic peaceful uprising, brought millions of Filipinos to the streets of EDSA, demanding Marcos step down. Soldiers and military leaders defected, refusing to carry out orders to crush the protests. With his grip on power slipping, Marcos fled with his family to America, airlifted by U.S. forces. Yet history has a strange way of repeating itself. Rodrigo Duterte, a former city mayor, had risen to the presidency with an iron fist. His brutal war on drugs was both praised and condemned worldwide, leaving a lasting imprint on the nation. Under his administration, he cultivated an image of a strongman leader, appealing to Filipinos who longed for decisive governance. His popularity extended beyond his term, making him a kingmaker in the Philippine politics. His daughter, Sara Duterte, was seen as the natural heir to his political legacy. As a mayor of Davao City, she had built a reputation as a tough and pragmatic leader. Much like her father, many expected her to run for president, a move that could have cemented the Duterte brand in national politics for another 6 years. But Marcos Jr. had other plans. Rather than facing off against the Dutertes, he sought to unite their forces. In a strategic move, he convinced Sara to run as his vice president instead. This alliance proved to be a political masterstroke. By securing Duterte's vote base, especially in Mindanao, where the family held immense influence, Marcos Jr. expanded his reach beyond the traditional strongholds of the Marcos loyalists. Their tandem appealed to both nostalgia for Marcos Sr.'s era and the Duterte's brand of governance, creating an unstoppable wave of support that propelled them to victory. Then came the most shocking move. Duterte himself became a target. The very man whose influence had paved the way for Marcos Jr.'s return to power was now facing a barrage of legal troubles and political attacks. The ICC revived its investigation into Duterte's drug war, a move that seemed conveniently timed. At the same time, key allies within the government distanced themselves from the former president. Behind the scenes, the Marcos camp subtly encouraged these developments. He ensured that Duterte's grip on Mindanao and his loyal base would weaken. His political dynasty was now under siege. Once powerful figures in his administration found themselves implicated in corruption cases, their influence fading as new political players loyal to Marcos took center stage. Even with the Duterte family, tensions rose. Sara Duterte, once a rising star, found herself sidelined in major government decisions. It became clear Marcos Jr. had used the Dutertes to win, but had no intention of sharing power. Now he was systematically dismantling the legacy of the man who had helped him rise. Now let's talk about the events leading up to the arrest of Duterte. Strangely enough, the arrest warrant came through text message. The text message was terse, almost casual in its wording, yet it carried the weight of an international legal order. Sent from an encrypted number linked to The Hague, it simply read, "Proceed with immediate enforcement. Subject Duterte. No further deliberation required." The message reached a select group within the Philippine law enforcement, bypassing the usual diplomatic channels. There was no official memorandum, no formal court proceedings, just a directive wrapped in secrecy. Even more bizarre, the ICC judges involved in the case had reportedly skipped several key legal steps, ignoring standard protocols for issuing a warrant against a former head of state. Behind closed doors, whispers of a backroom deal between Marcos Jr. and certain ICC officials grew louder. Sources claim that Marcos Jr. sought to eliminate a lingering political threat while mending ties with the international community, specifically Western nations wary of Duterte's legacy. The rushed nature of the warrant suggested urgency, as if the entire process had been orchestrated to catch Duterte off guard before he could mobilize his loyalists. For Duterte, it was a shocking betrayal. He had always dismissed the ICC as a toothless foreign entity, but now he was staring at an unprecedented scenario, an arrest warrant delivered not through legal channels, but through a single and traceable text message. Let's set the scene. It was a quiet evening in Manila, and former President Duterte had just returned from a private trip to Hong Kong. At 80 years old, he moved slowly, leaning on his cane as he stepped off the plane at Ninoy Aquino International Airport. He was expecting the usual security detail, but something was off. The moment he entered the terminal, an overwhelming police presence greeted him. Not just local officers, but an elite force, fully armed. This was no ordinary security detail. These men were operating under direct orders from the president. Duterte's longtime bodyguards immediately sensed the danger. His closest allies, former cabinet members, legal advisors, and retired military officers, rushed to intervene, demanding answers, but their words fell on deaf ears. The operation was airtight. Before Duterte could protest, two high ranking officers stepped forward. One of them, a general known for his past loyalty to the administration, said, "Sir, you need to come with us. Now." Duterte paused, gripping his cane tighter. His expression shifted from confusion to anger. "What is this? What are you talking about?" But there was no time for debate. Within seconds, several officers closed in. The sheer number of men surrounding him made resistance impossible. His allies asked about the due process, demand to see a warrant, but there was none. No paperwork, no official charges read aloud, just silence and swift action. Duterte was carefully ushered inside a van, his cane taken from him as a precaution. Their destination was not the Philippine palace. It wasn't even a military base. Instead, the convoy drove straight to a private airstrip where a Gulfstream jet was waiting, its engines already humming. It was only when he saw the tail markings belonging to a European aircraft that the gravity of the situation sank in. This was not just an arrest, it was an extraction. "Where are you taking me?" said Duterte, his voice shaking with rage. No answer. The officers remained silent as they guided him up the steps of the jet. The jet was headed for the Netherlands. As the plane disappeared from the Philippine airspace, news of his sudden disappearance spread like wildfire. Duterte's supporters panicked. His critics celebrated, but the truth was undeniable. Duterte had been taken not by rebels, not by vigilantes, by his own government. And his next stop, The Hague, where he would face trial for crimes against humanity. What happens now? Is this justice, or is it yet another chapter of betrayal in Philippine politics? Did Marcos Jr. play his cards too well, or has he set the stage for his own downfall? One thing is certain: history does not just repeat itself, it evolves, mutates, and finds new ways to remind us that power is never permanent.